Okay, let's get started. Well, so in this video, I'm gonna explain about presuppositions, and my name is Faisal Karni, and I'm making this video to make it a PPT for accomplishing the pragmatics final term test. So here's how it goes. Uh, First of all, so I can see from the screen here, presupposition. Table of content. First we have pragmatics, presupposition and its types, as well as the entailment. Okay, let's start from first. Pragmatics. In communications, it's essential to know how language is used. Understanding thoughts, idea feelings, and speakers' intentions is the key to communication. Pragmatics is the study of language that it tends to look into how words are produced. It deals with the speaker's intended meaning, and then in the situations, the listener will try to interpret and understand how the words are being used or spoken. The case of pragmatics often occurs in a conversation. Yule's 1996 notes that pragmatics is a study of speaker meaning. It is concerned with the study of meaning as communicated by a speaker or writer and interpreted by a listeners or reader. Also, the book, The Study of the Language Functions, the fifth editions by also Yule, 2010, page 126, considers that pragmatics is a study of invisible meaning, or how we recognize what something means even when it's not actually spoken or written. Also, in a book study of the language, the fifth edition, so again by you, will consider a pragmatic study of the invisible, I'm sorry, it's double, I can't erase that. Right. So here's next. So we get I have two experts' opinion here, and as definition of pragmatic stated by the expert above, basically there's only one. It can be wrapped up that pragmatics is the study of meanings of utterance based on a context that includes both how speakers illustrate their ideas and how the hearers interprets the speaker's intended meaning. Moving on. So here's presuppositions. So people might wonder, what is a presupposition? So in a branch of pragmatics, one of the branches of pragmatics is the presuppositions. In short, it could be simply defined as believing that something is true without having any evidence. According to Yule, 2010's page 130, again, the study of the language. The presupposition is what the speaker or the writer assumes is true or known by a listener or the reader. Example, are you playing a game? The presupposition we have here, have somebody else, are you playing a game means these persons have played before and still playing. It's indicated by again word. Example number 2. Do you want to add a sugar to your tea? And presupposition we have here, The persons haven't put sugar or have put sugars, but once more. And another expert's opinion I have is from the Levinson. According to him, Levinson, 1983, page 168. He defines that a presupposition is a kind of background assumptions against the action, theory, expressions, or utterance that make sense or rational. Presuppositions. Example. Jane told Hannah to close the door, back. The presupposition we have that Hannah didn't close the door when she came in, or she left the door open because Jane told Hannah to close the door back. Moving on. Presupposition here. Presuppositions are my conclusion. So the presupposition, based on the definitions of presupposition above, I could jump to the conclusion that the writer concludes a presupposition is an assumption of the listener or speaker about the utterance, which means that the listener can identify the intended meaning of the speaker's assumption. All right. Both speaker and the hearer share the same assumption or the same idea and assume to be true about what is being talked about. Sounds complicated? No. Janet told Hannah to close the door back. So the listener here knows that Hannah didn't close the door, and the speaker and the hearer share the same assumption that Hannah didn't close the door, and this is assumed to be true of what is being talked about. And maybe it's like beating around the bush. Let's try another one. Okay, I have types of presuppositions, how to identify and analyze the utterance when it contains a presupposition or not. The first, the types of presuppositions. Existential presuppositions. These types are frequently found in any definite noun phrase in describing the existence of particular entity's name. For example, the founding fathers, the great philosopher, and the president of Indonesia. So the here is the noun phrase or definite noun phrase. Also, the existential presupposition type describes the possessions to describe the ownership of something. For instance, your paperwork. The paperwork is your paper. Your is the possession. Another example would be her paperwork's rumple, probably like torn off. Her paperwork's really good, or indicates the possessions of something. Next up, we have factive presupposition. Factive presupposition takes place when the utterance provides a real fact or actual news. This information is generally followed by the verbs and be verbs. For instance, I didn't notice here. I didn't notice or see he's been here. So I didn't notice or he's been here. This presupposing that he has arrived, the proposition, right? And he's been here means he's arrived. I didn't notice means he is actually an error, but you just didn't see him. That's a presupposition. And factive presupposition consists of verbs such as notice, see, know, and realize, and many other verbs as well as the phrases, including be verbs with aware, glad, sorry, weird, and many others. So those are factive presuppositions when the utterance provides real facts or actions. Next, the third types of presupposition, we have lexical. The lexical presupposition is to presuppose that a certain meaning of the speakers into understood non-asserted meaning. So in this case, both speaker and the writer, or speaker or writer and the hearer possess the same idea, even if they share a different interpretation. For example, Hannah, okay, let's take it Hannah again. Hannah doesn't manage to complete her work. So Hannah doesn't manage to complete her work. The asserted meaning here is she fails because she didn't manage to complete her work. So the presupposition is she fails, and the non-assertive presupposition is she tries. Okay, at least she tried. The words of lexical items involve stop, so lexical presupposition to identify when the utterance contains the lexical presupposition when somebody says stop, the verb stop, start, again, and so on. Oh, I hope that makes sense. The fourth type of presupposition would be structural presupposition. The type of these presuppositions is typical cut and dry, means really clear, in which the utterance are illustrated with obvious structure without basically having to analyze the use and the meaning of the words, taking or the phrases of when. Okay, let's take the example. When did they get back? When did they go back to their hometown? So somebody's asking, right? They're cutting dry. When did they go back to their hometown? For example, so these presuppositions, they went back to their hometown, right? So when did they get back to their hometown? So the actual fact, the utterance to be analyzed here, they get back to their hometown. And then the structural presupposition comes with a WH questions. So if somebody says, "What are you doing?" No. What she did, what she did that means the presupposition means she did something. And example, what else we have? When, how did she manage to how does Hannah manage to get over homework? So the presupposition would be Hannah get over her homework. But this type of presupposition is the structural one, means structural presupposition when the use of WH questions involves. The fifth types, non-factive presuppositions. So non-factive presuppositions demonstrate the false information means wrong. The utterance of these presupposition types ordinarily shows an unreal or untrue statement that theoretically contradicts the factive presuppositions. It's really hard to pronounce. For instance, Hannah pretends to be strong. So pretty much easy to identify the presupposition. Hannah pretends to be strong. So the presupposition we have here, Hannah is not actually strong. The items for non-factive are normally entailing the plenty number of English verbs like dream, imagine, pretend, and so on. So those are non-factive presupposition. That shows unreal or untrue statements that are theoretically and contradict to the factive presupposition. The factive is the actual one, actual presuppositions, while non-factive is the unreal or untrue statements. Example, if I were, if I were, if I were a cat, I could climb the tree. And those are not true because I'm a human. The last presupposition we have is counterfactual presuppositions. This is presupposition that draws utterly upside down beliefs or understanding of the statements expressed. So as a case for this point is, or if I were her, I would talk to Hannah. All right, probably like a misexplain there. So if I were her, I would talk to Hannah, presupposing that I'm not her. And the counterfactual presupposition presupposes that informations in the if clauses is not true by the time of the utterance produced. So, oh, yeah. So if somebody say if, so if somebody imagine like if I were you, if my cats were lying, if my cats were a bird, they they could fly. Like I could, you know, they probably like invite me to fly with them. Okay, let's review the non-factive presuppositions. The non-factive presuppositions, the utterance of presupposition types ordinarily shows an unreal or untrue statement that theoretically contradicts the factive presupposition. For instance, Anna pretends to be strong, and she is not strong, presupposing that Hannah is not strong. The items for non-factive are normally entailing plenty number of English verbs like dream, imagine, and pretend. Dream, imagine, and pretend actually shows an unreal and untrue statement. That's all from the types of presupposition. Now we're moving to the entailment. The entailment is something that necessarily follows from what is certain to certainly true. The entailment is also a relationship between the two or more sentences that deals with a true value concept. Meanwhile, presupposition, just now that I explained, is an assumption of listener or the speaker about the utterance. So one of the assumption and one of the truth value concept, basically like the actual conceptual, right? Like something real and cannot be presupposed since it deals with a truth value concept. Moving on, both speaker in presupposition, both speaker and the hearer share the same assumption and assume to be true about what is being talked about. According to the Yale again, 1996, a presupposition is something that a speaker assumes to be the case prior to making an utterance. Basically, like you believe what's, I believe that it's something, and presupposition speakers have the presupposition, not the sentence. That is presupposition, means speaker presupposes the sentence or the utterance. Meanwhile, the entailment is something that logically follows from what is asserted in the utterance. Sentence. So entailment means sentence have the entailments, not the speaker. Let's go into this a little bit further. Example. Mary's brother bought 3 horses. Okay. In the presuppositions, we know that Mary has brother, and Mary exists here since her name is mentioned, and her brother bought animals, and her this is common knowledge that the horses would be cost an arm and leg, which is expensive. So the presuppositions, Mary's brother has a lot of money since he could buy the three horses. Those are presupposition analysis, according to my opinion. While in entailment analysis, Mary's brother bought something, right? Because going back to the example again, Mary's brother bought three horses. Entailment analysis would be Mary's brother bought something. Mary's brother three animals, bought three horses, and many other logical consequences means logical opinion. Again, in entailment, the sentence have an entailment, not the speaker. So we don't basically have to deal with anything in a entailment since it just provides the logical consequences or logical possibility. Speaking of the entailments, this entailment that I mentioned just now follow from the sentences, regardless of whether the speakers believe are right or wrong. In fact, they're more being communicated than is said. So the functions of the entailment here try to like communicate than it said. It doesn't focus on the utterance or many others analysis. Therefore, because of its logical nature, the entailment is not generally discussed as much in pragmatics as the more speaker-dependent notion of the presupposition. Next, well, I'm coming to the end of my presentation, so I got a bit of graph or the reference that I got here from George Yule, 1996, Levinson's, 1983, and George Yule again in the book of study of the language functions in 2010. Okay, that's all from me. I hope the presentation goes well and my explanation cutting dry. That's all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Stop recording. Stop recording or pause.